Labour lawyer Patrick Deale joins us now to discuss the relevance of trade unions in this day and time. Thank you so much indeed for joining us. Welcome to the programme.
My pleasure, Peter. Good to be here.
Great. I just wonder, maybe we can start with a big picture. The union numbers have been dwindling for some time and getting smaller and smaller. The people that are signed up to unions. What does that tell us?
Well, it tells us, at first glance that the fact that union membership is declining means that the clout of unions itself are declining. And it may not be just the issue of the attractiveness of the unions, but the force of economic circumstances. The circumstances of the economy have forced reduction in the number of jobs, massive retrenchments, and a shrinking, basically, of the economy, and along with it, a shrinking of the labor force. So I think that is probably the overpowering influence that has reduced the overall number of the total workforce, and therefore the number of membership of the unions. So that's just on a broad picture what has happened there. And so we are not creating the jobs that we required. We can't create them fast enough for the number of new people coming into the economy, let alone catch up with the vast quantity or number of people who are also already excluded from the economy. And in that environment, unions find themselves in an invidious and inherently weak position. And internally, it shows with the fracturing of the unions. And so all of those factors combined mean a declining union membership, but not a declining need for members, perhaps a different type of union involvement in the economy is what we could be looking at.
All right, I'm going to talk a little bit more about that just now. I do want to go back a little bit in history, and I just wonder if it isn't a question of, we often see political parties that are liberation parties that get across political hurdles, and then they find it difficult to govern. The unions in this country, we're very much involved in the political conversation. A lot of the worker issues had a political basis, as it were. Then came democracy. Do you think that the challenge was a failure to adapt to a new order, much as a lot of political parties struggle once the liberation portion has been won?
I think that's exactly it, Peter. We before democracy, we had a period of industrial democracy before we had a full political democracy. And in my opinion, the unions have not adapted to the changes in the modern economy, particularly over the last 25 years. The economy has changed radically, as we all know, in those last period of times. And the unions have probably not kept up with strategies which adapt to the changed circumstances. And that is what has led to the less effectiveness or the reduced effectiveness of unions. So certainly it is a major factor of a need to adapt from the old policies of resist and struggle orientation to participation in the economy, because at the end of the day, it's an economic engagement between management and unions, but in labor relations. It is not primarily a political one. It is the harsh reality of economics which makes things work and could work differently if the manner and the quality of engagement were different.
Do you think it's the employers as well that have adapted better? There was a company I worked for, and they had things called workplace forums, and they got rid of the unions, essentially. And the workers seemed quite happy to come into this new order. And the thing about it was local for the company, dealing with company issues and company labor, and not a broad church where the companies are different, even if the members are the same unions.
Well, Peter, that's, the opportunity for engagement on wealth creating collaborative relationships between management and unions lies in structures, internal structures like workplace forums that could run parallel to the traditional structures for wage bargaining and the management of fair labor relations. Unfortunately, the workplace forums, which were introduced in the Labor Relations Act in 1995, the whole revamp of the Labor Relations Act then, did not take off. They were a damp squib. And it's because unions were suspicious of them and thought it was a way in which management could co-opt their members into the management camp, as it were, and leave nothing for the unions to do. And I think it is a lost opportunity. One could understand at that early stage why the unions were hesitant and distrustful given our history. But if we were to relook at similar structures to replace workplace forums to run in parallel with other bargaining, power-based structures like collective bargaining, bargaining councils, and so on, I think that is the major opportunity to try and get management and unions to reconstruct their labor relations away from adversarial, warlike relations and into cooperative ones, but respecting the role of unions, which are critically important to marshal the troops of unions workers together, and for management to engage coherently with a representative body. So there's a major opportunity there, but which was lost in 1995, unfortunately.
Let's talk about the needs for unions now. What do they do except for, because all we see in the news cycle, sadly, is about wages, but there must be much more than that, and why they're still needed.
Well, in my opinion, unions can play a very constructive role in labor relations. And in that sense, especially in South Africa, we have vast gaps between, in wealth gaps between management and unions and the various strata of organization. I think unions can play a very constructive force to create cohesive relationships with large bodies, particularly in large organizations. We look at the mines, we look at the big industrial companies, and they can play a very useful uniting role. It's a case of using that united role constructively in a way that is not adversarial and warlike, rather than contributory, and finding a way of growing the cake, growing the wealth, so that there's more to share by everyone, instead of the model of simply defending and attacking and alienating actually employers. So in that way, that shrinks the economic cake, that makes unions less attractive for employers and causes employers to try and escape unions by introducing technology, automated work processes, and so on, to escape the consequences of unions. So that is really, I think, where the opportunity lies to build a constructive relationship, instead of, we were mentioned earlier, about moving away from the old adversarial, warlike talk into a more collaborative style.
I wonder sometimes also about the politics inside these unions, because we find a lot of fighting at the leadership levels, and one wonders if the poor worker on the grassroots, on the shop floor, quite understands some of the things that are being decided for them in their name.
I think often they don't understand, and often union leaders have run way ahead of their members and left them behind. We saw examples of this back in the mining industry, when there was a great split in the union membership in the mines, because there was a perception that the leadership had run ahead of the union members. And so there is most certainly that perception that has arisen amongst ordinary workers, that their members don't care for them as much as they should do on shop floor levels. They often see their leaders dealing with, as you mentioned, political issues, policy issues way beyond the shop floor. What workers want is for unions to look after them, to keep them safe from employers who mistreat them who treat them badly, commit unfair labor practices, suspend them, dismiss them, and they want union members to defend their labor rights in all those respects. In a way, in addition to the collective bargaining, it's a safety net for union members who otherwise probably wouldn't have a safety net. And that safety net, a lot of union members feel has been lost because the leadership has gone more into politics, more into national issues, instead of focusing on where it really counts, and that is on the shop floor or in the mine and in the shaft, etc. And that is a gap where I think union members and leaders are conscious of and are trying to fix it. But unfortunately, it hasn't happened, before splits in labor, when divisions have happened. COSATU split into two federations, and now one federation is being split virtually down again. So unions are fragmenting instead of uniting. And that's what gives them power. That gives them clout, is unity and not disunity. And the needs of workers are being lost in these political skirmishes at the top, unfortunately.
Patrick Deale, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you very, very much indeed. Your insights greatly appreciated. Thanks for your time.
My pleasure, Peter. Good night.
Thank you. Good night.